It has been yet another busy week here in Washington, D.C., and frankly, I don't see any signs of that slowing down in the near future. We've had a tragic mid-air collision near D.C.'s Reagan Airport. That even added more to the mix, as you can well imagine. But with so much going on, it can be easy for us to miss something or to not catch the significance of certain developments. Just the executive orders and the actions of President Trump alone can leave your head spinning as they're happening at so rapidly a pace. So joining me now to recap some of what we saw this week, and more importantly, how we can look at some of these things through the lens of Scripture, is David Closson. He's the director here at the Center for Biblical Worldview at Family Research Council. David, always great to have you here on Fridays to put a biblical perspective of it all. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be with you again, Jody.
All right, well, let's, when we were together last Friday, we were still waiting at that point on news regarding the Mexico City policy. So it's kind of happened. So tell us what President Trump decided to do with this policy and why the Mexico City policy is important.
Yeah, President Trump promised in the lead up to the inauguration that it would be kind of shock and awe, Jody, as far as dozens and actually hundreds of actions taken in the first couple of weeks. And for those of us who are social conservatives, you know, the issues of life and family and religious freedom, those are paramount. Those are issues, of course, that we think that there's clear biblical principles. There's a thus saith the Lord. And it took a couple days to get to some of these, so we've been tracking it. Obviously, you mentioned in your lead-in, Jody, that folks can go on the Stand Firm app and actually track the commitments and how the Trump administration is doing. But since we've last spoken, Jody, President Trump once again reinstated the Mexico City policy. And this ought to be commended by every Christian in America, because what the Mexico City, and like he did in 2017, it's not just the Mexico City policy. This is a provision that says that America's foreign aid dollars will not go to fund organizations or programs that either perform or promote abortion. Ronald Reagan was the first president to put this policy in place. Subsequent Democrat presidents repealed it, and then Republican presidents put it back in place. Trump in 2017 expanded it to cover even more dollars, and what he did this time around covered, it was once again expansive. 2017, this covered $8.8 billion of funds. So this is a win, Jody. This means that billions of taxpayer dollars that are exported overseas will not go to promote or fund abortion. We ought to be grateful for that.
Yeah, that's huge. That is so grateful is the word. In fact, I'm glad you reminded us, David, that Trump himself told us that the first few weeks were going to be shock and awe. What a perfect description of what it's been. And it reminded me, I don't think we put shock and awe on the commitment tracker. But that is a promise. He promised there would be shock and awe. So we may need to go in and add that. We'll just go ahead and check that one off for you. But in addition to the incredible progress of reinstating the Mexico City policy, as you just described, I mean, the U.S. now has also re-entered the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which we talked a little bit before. But so let's go back on that. What is this Geneva Consensus Declaration, and why is that one so important as well?
Yeah, in short, Jody, the Geneva Consensus Declaration, this was spearheaded under the first Trump administration. My friend Valerie Huber was kind of the architect of this, working with Mike Pompeo, again, in the first Trump administration. This is a declaration that now 35 nations have joined to promote women's health around the world. But it particularly contains a clause that states that there is no international right to an abortion. Because, Jody, you know, with the United Nations and all these multi-nation agreements and pacts, they're always trying to promote divisive social policies, and, you know, more developed nations trying to impose this on developing nations. And this was significant in the first Trump administration because it made it clear to the world that America does not believe that there's a so-called right to an abortion, a right to kill your unborn child. Of course, the Biden administration, this was to be expected, repealed, made the United States withdraw from this declaration when they took office 4 years ago. But it shows that one of Marco Rubio's first acts of Secretary of State was to formally put his name behind it and say that the United States is once again joining this declaration, which again signals, I think, to the world, the United States is back in a powerful way for the unborn. We're not going to force abortion on developing nations that look to the United States for foreign assistance. We're not going to, it's really a cultural imperialism that the Biden administration, of course, the Obama administration forced on the world. The United States is done doing that. And again, I think this sends a strong signal to the rest of the world, particularly developing nations that have a Catholic or an evangelical population. This is good news.
Yeah, it really is, and that's not the only news on the abortion issue. I think it was Wednesday the Pentagon rescinded the Biden-era policies that facilitated abortion among members of the military. In fact, this is something, policy that we here at FRC covered extensively when former Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin put it into place. So bring us up to speed on that issue. That's another big one for life.
Absolutely, Jody. And just briefly, you know, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, the Biden administration said that they were going to do anything and everything they could to still promote abortion. And one of the things that they did was put a policy in place at the Department of Defense that said that servicemen and women, so service women, could access abortion. Now, of course, service people, they don't decide where they're stationed. So the logic of the DoD policy was that if you're sent to a base in a conservative state that makes it hard to get an abortion, you could request a leave, paid leave, and you could have your travel expenses reimbursed. So if you wanted to go get an abortion in a liberal state, you could do that and then submit your receipts to the Department of Defense, and they would reimburse you. Clear violation of the Hyde Amendment. This led to Tommy Tuberville putting a hold on hundreds of promotions. So this was a huge, blatant, unconstitutional move by the Biden administration. Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, he promised us that he was going to return the department to why the department exists, to lethality, to making sure that we can fight and win the nation's wars. We're not going to engage in social experimentation, things like that. And this policy being rescinded means, once again, unborn children will have more protections. And it tells us that the Defense Department under Secretary Hegseth's leadership is serious about rooting out some of the mess that we saw during the Biden administration.
They're rooting out the mess and reinstating the purpose of the military. Just keep focused on what our job is to do. If I can shift gears on you, David, President Trump made news on Monday by signing the first of its kind, an order related to protecting minor children from transgender procedures. Tell us about that one. That's another big, huge win.
Well, it really is. And Jody, this is the Worldview segment. We like to end the show at Washington Watch at the end of the week, thinking about all these issues through a biblical worldview. The biblical worldview could not be more clear about our embodiment as male and female. And one of the things that we've seen over the last several years with these revolutionary gender ideologues is pushing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, irreversible surgeries on minor children. FRC's been involved with this on the state level with the SAFE Act, which we now see in a couple dozen states. But what the president did is he put out this executive order. The title is Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. And I just love that, Jody, because the president is calling it for what it is. This is not so-called gender affirming care, the phrase that the euphemism that the left uses. This is not gender affirming care. This is chemical and surgical mutilation. And what a refreshing breath of fresh air it is that the administration is actually using language, not hiding behind euphemisms, calling these things out for what they are. And there's teeth behind it, Jody. The executive order goes on to say that any institution that receives government research grants, which is a lot of state-level universities around the country, any institution that receives research grants from the federal government must immediately desist from engaging in these types of surgeries. It even went out of the way, Jody, to talk about the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, that says that WPATH, which again the federal government under the Biden administration had relied on for guidance, it says WPATH has just been promoting junk science, and that the federal government will no longer look to this activist organization for any meaningful guidance when it comes to health. And so again, this is a big win. Policy matters, worldview matters, and this is just a great example that I think Christians around this country should be grateful. Common sense has returned to the Oval Office.
And common sense is rooted in transcendent truth. As we talked about around the table at FRC this week, it's rooted in biblical reality. That's where common sense comes from. And I don't know if you saw this. This had literally hot off the press. Right before we came on the program, we had yet another executive order signed. I don't know if you were made aware of this right before we came on or not, but the new executive order for federal employees to remove pronouns from email signatures. Yet another step towards doing away with all this DEI stuff that's just been taken over. Before we go, our time's clicking away, so I want to keep running here quickly as we can, David. But we've been talking, in fact, on the show today about probably three of the most controversial picks for various roles in Trump's administration. I was speaking earlier, right before you, with General Boykin about Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, she's the nominee for the Director of National Intelligence. But there's so much that can be said about her that mostly is not being dealt with. So do you have anything you can add to us about maybe her voting record while she was a congresswoman or whatever? Have you been following Tulsi Gabbard?
I did, Jody, and I was told we were going to briefly look at her career, so I actually just simply pulled up the FRC scorecard. So, one of the ways the Family Research Council holds members of Congress accountable is that we will score votes that they take, and we will take a position. And if you vote with us, give it a thumbs up. If you vote against us, thumbs down. Tulsi Gabbard, this is interesting. I did not know this, has a 2% lifetime voting record when it comes to the Family Research Council, which, needless to say, Jody, that's not good. And now, of course, we are a pro-life, pro-family organization. Those are the types of votes that we're scoring. I'm sure we could have a debate on, what kind of effect that would have on your ability to be in the position that she's been appointed for. But it does speak to your worldview. This is someone, again, Jody, and I have the voting record in front of me. This is someone who voted against the Born Alive Survivor Protection Act. This is someone who's voted against the Pain Capable Act. So just votes I know you took as a member of Congress, various protections for life. She voted against a piece of legislation that would have codified this idea that you can't give tax dollars forward for abortion. This is someone who voted against a piece of legislation that would have disapproved of the transgender military policy. That would probably have been under the Obama administration. So this is not someone that has historically been a friend to social conservatives, and I think it's okay to acknowledge that.
Well, and you mentioned worldview and all of that. That is stunning. 2% scorecard with FRC. That is pretty eye-opening. But there's also reports of Tulsi Gabbard's ties to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And I mean, is she a Hindu? Certainly Modi and India is Hindu. Does she have a particular faith that she claims?
Yeah, she's the first Hindu to serve in Congress, Jody, and I think I know we're running out of time, so I would advise folks to go to the Christian Post. They have a really interesting article by a Christian pastor who was detained in India, and he talks about Tulsi Gabbard's ties to Hindu nationalism. I think that's interesting. I think it's worth making sure that's part of the national conversation because, of course, worldview matters.
Yeah, worldview matters, and people can be of whatever faith they are. If they're elected, and that's fine. But worldview matters, and I say that one more time where people can see that article.
Yeah, you can go to thechristianpost.com, and there's, again, a pastor has a really eye-opening article that I think is worth reading as we watch the confirmation hearings.
David Closson from the Center for Biblical Worldview here at FRC. Always great to have you on Fridays. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining us.